If you've added accessories or lights to your F-150, you might be aware of the nightmare of wires going from the engine bay all the way to the inside of your truck, not to mention all the switches you would have had to stick onto your dash. And unless you're driving a Ford Raptor, Ford doesn't offer a factory-style solution to manage it all. Well, today we're fixing that with a panel from Auxbeam. This will put all your controls for your lights and accessories all in one place. In this video, I will show you how to install it step by step and how to achieve a clean factory quality install, all without drilling any unsightly holes in your dash. But we're not stopping there. We're also going to be installing these Auxbeam 5-inch LED lights. Big thanks to Auxbeam for sending these products over. Now, as far as what's actually included in the kit, here's the breakdown. You've got the switch panel itself, a circuit control box, a circuit breaker, mounting brackets for both the switch panel and circuit control box, a waterproof cover, but hopefully in your F-150 you don't actually need that, a set of labels to customize your switches, and of course all the wiring harnesses you'll need to get it all installed and working. Now that's going to cover the basics, but let's talk about the switch panel itself and what makes this model stand out. First off, you've got RGB backlighting that lets you choose from unlimited color options so you can match it perfectly with your dash or other interior lighting. It also has 3 different modes for each switch, meaning you can toggle, which means on or off, momentary, so as long as you hold it, or pulsed, giving you a strobe light effect. This gives you a ton of flexibility depending on what you're controlling and how you want to control it. Another standout feature is the Bluetooth app control. For my setup, I'll be integrating it with my Android head unit, giving me another easy way to control all the lighting and accessories on my truck. There's also a group setting in the app, which is great if you want to control multiple lights or accessories at once. Just set them up as a group and you're good to go. Now let's take a closer look at the circuit control box itself. So there's a tab here, you slide it off, and there's little tabs there you want to go up and over. And here we go. So we have 2 30 amp slots right here, 2 20 amp slots here in 3 and 4, 10 amp slots in 5 and 6, and 2 5 amp slots in 7 and 8. For a total of 8 slots, your positive and your negative leads for each switch will go in here. Positive is clearly marked, so is negative, so you'll put those 2 leads there, and then your one switch will correspond with whatever you connected to that. Now you don't wire this straight to your battery. That's where the circuit breaker comes in. So your positive will go to the circuit breaker, and the circuit breaker will have a positive wire that goes to your battery, and the negative can go to your vehicle's negative terminal. This ACC or accessory wire will go to a fuse or another wire that turns on when your vehicle is on, and I will show you more about that a little bit later. And then the 4-pin connector is for the switch panel itself. Now another cool feature about this control box is the fact that it has solid state relays, meaning back in the day, or if you've already installed some lights or accessories in your vehicle, these might be the relays that you're used to, but this actually has solid state relays. They're nice, low profile, and they're actually hidden under this cover that gives it a waterproof seal. I'm also noticing here that they give you a few extra fuses and a fuse puller as well, which is pretty cool. Now, before we get started with the actual install, let's talk about where we're gonna mount the switch panel in the interior of the truck. Every 12th generation F-150 that I'm aware of has this cubby right here, and it's pretty pointless. You can't even put your phone into it. I'm gonna go ahead and stick my switch panel there. Even though the Auxbeam itself has holes for you to actually bolt in or screw in the switch panel to a mount, that's not really possible unless you're willing to drill holes in your dash, or at least the outside of your dash, and I'm not willing to do that. Right here I have a 3D printed bracket that will be going inside the cubby once you remove the factory mat. So I'm going to slide the mat out, and as you can see, it sits pretty flush. It does have holes in order to screw in the Auxbeam switch panel in the back, so I will screw it in first. I will then put 3M adhesive on the bottom, slide it in there, and the only hole that I'm actually gonna have to drill is gonna be in the back of the cubby, but nobody's gonna see it. And that's just to feed the wire through the back. No visible holes on your dash. So this will result in a pretty clean install. I am gonna include the file to this 3D model down in the video description below for free. And any products I mentioned in this video are gonna be linked down in the video description below. Now, if you don't have access to a 3D printer, you could use a 3D print on-demand service, but those can get costly. So what I'd recommend is maybe still take a look at the 3D print file and see if you can mimic it with some other material, such as plastic that you could cut, wood, or even metal. Essentially, all you need is some kind of L bracket and then a flush mount with holes for you to screw in the Auxbeam switch panel into. Now, before doing any electrical work on your vehicle, it's always smart to disconnect the battery. So I'm gonna go ahead and, using an 8mm, disconnect the negative terminal just like that, and now the truck has no power. Next, I need access to the back of this cubby so we can drill the hole so we can run the wire for the switch panel itself. So what we need to do is we need to lower the glove box, make sure all your stuff's out of the way, and then once you've done that, you're gonna squeeze on the sides of the glove box, and it's gonna drop down, and then there's 3 10mm bolts we need to go ahead and remove underneath the airbag. Now the next thing I need to do is I need to remove this airbag. So I am armed with 2 things, a plastic pry tool and a microfiber. So once the airbag comes out, I can set the microfiber there to kind of avoid scratching my trim panel right here. You can hear the clips release. There we go. Now I'm gonna come here. You do have to be a little bit aggressive with it. Just like that. And I think our airbag's pretty much ready to come out here. No need to disconnect it. I just need to kind of set it off to the side here. And then we need to remove these 2 7mm bolts holding this panel in. Now we should be able to pry on this panel right here. We are gonna have to disconnect the 12-volt plug on the back of this plug right here. There we go. It was pushed in right here, but I kind of pulled this back. I do see the 12-volt plug on the back that I'm gonna push in to try to release. Now, those pins love to crack, and it just cracked. There we go, disconnected it. So since the panel can't fully be released unless you take off the center console panel right here, which I'm not interested in doing, you're basically gonna be stuck like this, but that's okay because we can still get through here, run the wires, and on top of that, we can still get our drill bit to go all the way in there into the cubby and drill the hole. Now, as far as the hole goes, I'm not gonna go all the way to the bottom because in the event I wanted to reverse this, I still don't wanna mess with that notch that's in there for the rubber mat. So I'm actually gonna avoid that, and I'm going to aim for the middle. I'm gonna be using a 3/8 drill bit. And now we're switched over to a step drill bit, which I've marked the 5/8 hole with, so I know once I no longer see that color that I'm actually at the right hole size. So we're gonna continue on. So make sure when you're drilling that you move the 12-volt plug that goes to this out of the way. I brought it up all the way to the AC vent. That way when I'm drilling, I don't have to worry about cutting it or hitting it. I was able to successfully drill the 5/8 hole through the cubby. I did have to come at it from the back as well because I couldn't get my drill all the way in there, and this is short, so that may just depend on your drill and the drill bit that you use. Now you could stop here, but if you want a cleaner look and to protect your wires a little bit further, you can stick a 5/8 grommet down into the hole, and that's what I'm gonna be doing. The only issue with the grommet, even though it's perfect for a 5/8 hole, is the fact that it is a super tight fit around the connector. I'm gonna run the connection on the back of the Auxbeam switch panel, and I'm actually gonna put the grommet through it first, and then I'm going to slide the grommet over it, and I will insert the grommet into the cubby once the wire's already been ran, because it is hard to slide the connector for the Auxbeam through the grommet once the grommet's already been installed in the cubby. So here's a closer look at the 3D printed bracket. Drop the cord through the hole in the back, make sure it is oriented in the way that I want, which is with the Auxbeam logo at the bottom, so it's facing upright, and then I'm simply going to turn it over and screw it in. So after going through the hardware bag that came with the Auxbeam switch panel, this is what I found for flush mounted screws. I have 2 longer ones and 3 short ones. I would prefer 4 of these, so I don't know if I'm missing one or what, so I'm gonna use these 3 plus 1 long one. Since we are going through a bracket that's somewhat thick, I'm sure it'll be all right. Now that the Auxbeam panel is mounted to its bracket, we need to come over here and clean out the cubby to make sure that the 3M adhesive that's gonna go on the bottom of the bracket sticks nice and good to the cubby itself. I'm just gonna be using some alcohol with a shop rag to clean out the cubby, and then I will also wipe down the bottom of the bracket as well. I will be using 3M VHB to mount to the bottom of the bracket itself, but another alternative to this, you could use like some industrial grade Velcro. That's an option as well. So the goal of this is to cover the VHB basically in 2 strips right here on the bottom of the bracket and cut it to fit if necessary. Now before I actually take off the adhesive tape on the back of this, I want to make sure that I feed the wire through and add the grommet. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So it should sit pretty flush in here. So I'm just going to push it in. So it appears that the switch panel is only grabbing partially on the bottom. I don't know if that's because it's kind of angled or what, or my tape is kind of failing here. So I'm going to add some more mounting adhesive to the sides of the bracket. So once I added some tape to the sides of the bracket, it's holding it in there pretty flush. So we're looking at the passenger side of my engine bay, and down there, you will see a grommet that we're gonna go through. Specifically, we're gonna try to go through this portion of the grommet right there at the top. That's where we're gonna run the wiring harness for the switch panel. So I'm gonna try to cut into the top of it here. Let's see. Not a lot of room in here. Felt the tear. Oh, there we go. I will tell you, if you try to just push right through, it's not going to work. You have to find some way to widen that hole. If that's not working, you can just pull out the grommet and go through it, but I definitely wanted a cleaner look, so I finally managed to make the hole bigger and push it through that hole right there. All you need to do is stick your hand all the way to the back, and then eventually you'll find it, and you want to go towards the bottom, and then you're going to pull it out right through here. Now that we've got this wire ran through the firewall, we need to connect it to the back of the switch panel itself. I'm gonna feed the back of the wire behind the cubby slot, and I can literally reach in right behind the glove box and pull out the wires. Go ahead and make the connection with our switch panel and the firewall cable. Once you've aligned the notch, just go ahead and screw on the cap. And before I forget, I am gonna plug in the 12 volt that goes right above the cubby. I'm gonna go ahead and push this back into place. Now, a lot of people do mount their circuit control boxes to their fuse box, either by doing like Velcro or adhesive or drilling straight into it. I don't even know if the F-150 has the clearance to do that. Plus, I'm really not that interested in the way that looks aesthetically. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to mount it somewhere over here or over here. Unfortunately, I would prefer it closer to where my oil catch can is, but that's there, and I don't think I can utilize that bracket and still have enough room. Now, wherever you do decide to install your circuit control box, Auxbeam actually does give you two mounts. So you have like this flush mount here that you can utilize, and they also have this bracket right here. What's cool about this bracket is you can actually mount it this way or this way, depending on your situation and whatever works best for you. Just something to keep in mind whenever you mount it is the fact that under this is holes where your power wires and other accessory wires are gonna go through. So you can mount it like this, where they are hanging off the edge, or you can actually flip it around and have the wires come through the middle, like that. And you'll just have to line it up probably towards those holes right there in the back. So how I'm thinking I'm gonna mount my circuit control box is I'm gonna go over here by the oil catch can. Now, unfortunately, this surface is curved, so it is gonna be a little bit tricky. And I brought the box over itself just to kind of see my clearances because I have the oil catch can right there. So let's see what we can do. We can move this probably for the washer fluid out of this little bracket. Move it over for now. Bring this down. I'm gonna go ahead and give these self-tapping screws a shot to see if we can mount the bracket there in the back of the engine bay on the passenger side. That one's really not grabbing that much. Maybe we can do another one above it. So this side is just spinning, but we have our holes marked at least. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to remove the windshield wiper cowl. Removing the cowl will give me access to put bolts through here and the nuts on the back to secure it into place. So I am gonna need to lower the hood. So I'm gonna bring that down now. And then we actually need to remove our wiper blades. I'm gonna lift it up, pry away on that tab right here. Just like that, it's gonna lift up and off. There we go. I just had to kind of pop it off. Now, the reason we needed to remove both windshield wipers is because we have to lift the driver's side in order to get to the passenger side. Now, in order to get this cowl up, we do need to lift up this push pin right here. There we go. Now, this is essentially held in by clips right here. You can see it's already popping up. Let's see, there's another one over here in the corner. And now we can get to the passenger side. Another pin on this side we need to lift up, pry up right here on the cowl, and now we have access to get our bolts and our nuts through right here. I'm gonna go ahead and just mark one more hole so I can put another bolt here, so I'll be able to have 4 bolts holding this bracket into place. So I will reuse just that one screw. Now that we can lift up the cowl, I'm gonna take my 1/4-inch drill bit and I'm gonna make these holes for the bolts a little bit bigger. So it's just gonna be these 3 right here, and I'm still gonna use the self-drilling screw for the bottom one. So the hardware I'm going to be using to actually mount the bracket is going to be this bolt that was provided in the kit, along with a washer and a nut. I'm going to put the washer on the back side with the nut because I'm going to use my own washer that I have on the front. That'll just kind of hold it into place while we get everything else mounted. So for that first bolt, I couldn't get the washer because, as you can see, it's pretty close to the bottom. Everything looks good except for this guy right here. I'm going to see if I can take him out and put a washer and then reinstall him. I would just do 2, maybe the top 2. That would probably be the easiest. Don't have to worry about any self-tapping screws. Just drill your holes, put your bolts, your washers, and your nuts, and you're good to go. The other bolts will be to hold this into place. So we're going to have to Dremel out some notches right here so the cowl can go back down. So we widened the one that was already here, and then I had to make a whole new one for just this top bolt here. That clicked right into place. Now I will say, when you go to put on the wiper blades, just make sure if they're not lining up correctly, you just take them off, kind of move them up 1 notch, and then put them back on. I did have to do that a couple times. So ideally you have 2 bolts left over from mounting your bracket, so you can use them to mount the box. Since I was short 1 bolt, I just went ahead and found one in my hardware bag. So we now have this fully secured, bolted down on both sides. Now it's time to mount the circuit breaker. This actually goes between the circuit control box and the battery itself. So we need to mount it as close to the battery as possible because there will be a short red wire that runs from the bottom of the circuit breaker to the positive terminal on the battery. Now it is in a plastic little case. To take it off, there's just little tabs here. So you kind of pry it out, just like that. I guess you could probably install it like that, but I think what I'm going to do is I want it a little more secure. So I'm actually going to take just a typical hardware store, Home Depot L bracket or brace. And I think I'm going to put that here instead. So we'll put a bolt through here to hold it into place. Then I'm probably going to have to drill some holes to mount the circuit breaker itself. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to mark my holes, drill, and I'm even going to paint it black so it looks a little less hardware store and a little more automotive grade. So I've got the bracket painted and the holes drilled out for the circuit breaker. I am going to be using these bolts to actually attach not only the bracket to the battery box, but also the circuit breaker to the bracket itself. Well, that's going to be an issue. So I was pretty happy with the way this looked until I realized that's not going to go back on it. I went ahead and cut the bracket and resprayed it real quick, and we are ready to mount the circuit breaker. Now that the bracket's been attached, I'm just going to drop in the 2 bolts. Let's talk about the accessory wire. You need to tell the box when to turn on so it's not going to drain your battery. Now, one thing to note is that Auxbeam does include 2 fuse taps with the kit. However, I don't believe these are the right sizes for the F150 of this generation. Since I've already tapped into fuse 79, I'm going to take the wire that's already connected to the fuse. I'll take the Auxbeam wire. I'm going to tap into this, then I will take this connector over to the circuit control box. Now, since you are already running a wire into the interior passenger compartment of your truck, you can do that on the inside as well. You're just going to want something that comes on with the ignition. Grab this, pull it out, and then right here is going to be your interior fuse panel. You just want to squeeze the sides, pull it off, revealing your fuses, and everything is marked right here on the cover. And then from here, you can tap into a fuse that comes on with the ignition. One fuse you could try is fuse 34, and that's going to be for your reverse sensors, and that's going to be right under that relay right there. I'm going to go ahead and take the accessory wire, run it through the gap, and plug it in over here where it says accessory. I'm going to run the accessory wire over here with the factory wiring. In the kit, you have 2 positive wires, 1 short one and 1 long one. I'm going to start by wiring up the long red cable. So we're going to put it on the back terminal here, which is below the switch, and we're going to run this to the positive terminal on the circuit control box. I'm going to make sure it's not in the way of the negative terminal. And we'll take the short red wire and we'll attach that to the top of the circuit breaker. Reattach the nut. And now you can see why I mounted the circuit breaker so close to the battery. I'm going to attach it to this post right here. Cover that back up. Now we're going to take the ground wire that Auxbeam provides, attach it to the negative terminal on the control box, and then we'll run the other end to the battery. I'm going to take the other end of that wire and connect it right here to the post on the negative battery terminal. I'm just going to slide it over that connection right there. Now there's just one last step to wiring up the control box, and that's to connect the switch panel itself to the box. I'm going to run it up into here, right there. Fundamentally, your switch panel is ready to go. You're just missing any accessories, but I'm going to go ahead and turn on the truck, and we're going to make sure everything is functioning properly. Before I test it, I got to go ahead and put the circuit breaker back. Go ahead and recap these. And I'm going to slide the cover back on. There's our lights. And then when I remove the key from the ignition, it should turn off. Now that I know the switch panel is in there and working, I'm going to go ahead and reassemble the dash. I'm just going to take the Auxbeam cable and zip tie it to these factory wires right here. I'm going to go ahead and push this back in. I'm going to reinstall the two 7mm bolts I took out by the airbag. Now this piece is fully in place. Now we can reconnect the airbag. Kind of see the notches where the airbag is supposed to line up with. Then you can close your glove box by squeezing in on the sides. Now let's take a closer look at the Auxbeam X Pro 5-inch series lights. On the side here, you'll see the different lighting effects. So we have a main light, a white DRL, an amber DRL, but they do call it a turn signal. Then it shows the different combinations that you can have, the main light with the white DRL or the main light with the amber DRL. We've got an amber cover included. They are IP68 waterproof. They claim easy installation and a wide application of uses. Underneath the foam, we have Auxbeam sticker, instructions. There are actually two different wires for the DRLs. There's the white one and then the amber one. Now we won't be using the fuse, the switch, or the relay. We have our wiring harness. You have your harness that plugs into the back of the light, the amber covers, the brackets for the lights, installation hardware, nice Auxbeam cover, and there is the lights. So I basically found the total width of my lights with the gap that I wanted between each of them, and then I subtracted that from the overall width of this bar. So I'm going to start with the spacing that I need on each ends, and that should put me right about where I need to be. To install our light bracket mounts, I'm going to set the bracket there, drop the bolt, and then underneath I'm going to do a spring washer, a regular washer, and a nut. And then just tighten it up with a 17mm. Now it's time to actually mount the lights to the brackets. There are two mounting locations on each side of the bracket. One is straight and one has some adjustability, but because I want these basically straight on, I'm going to use the holes that should allow the light to sit flush and straight forward. To secure the light to the bracket, you're going to use the provided bolt, a spring washer, and a washer. So the lights are all mounted. They look really good. So what I need to do now is I need to wire them all together. So I'm going to work on that. I also ended up drilling some holes in my bumper in order to run the cables through, because I didn't want to run them through where the winch is, because I didn't think that looked really good. Each one of these has a harness that comes off the back, and then there's these connectors. So this connector connects to a longer harness that goes in like that. And at the end of this longer harness, you will find a relay. So all that I need from this harness is actually these two wires right here that come from the lights. I'm going to go ahead and cut off all the rest of this, including the relay, the fuse, and the wire that goes to the button. And then all we are left with are these wires that run up to the lights. Now we'll have to do this for the other sets of lights as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two sets of wires and I'm going to splice the yellow to yellow and the white to white, and then that way I just have one pair that I'm running through here. I'm also going to have to do this on the other side as well, and then I will tie both sets into a single pair. Now from here, I'm going to take this wire and wrap it around this one, and then I'm going to solder the connection. To seal these connections, I'm going to go ahead and use some liquid electrical tape. It's super messy stuff, but it should help with any protection against the elements. So I am ready to start wiring everything together. So what we have here is 4 sets of 16 gauge wire, red and black for each light. I'm going to take each one of these 16 gauge wires, all the reds and then all the black, to a 12 gauge wire. So I have a red 12 gauge wire right here, and that's going to connect to each one of the positive red 16 gauge wires. So essentially we're going to combine them all into one harness right now. So if you are using more than 4 lights, I would definitely recommend going with 10 gauge wire. Now it is worth mentioning that since I received these lights, Auxbeam has introduced a 4 and 6 piece kit of these lights on their website, and these kits do come with a pre-made wiring harness, making it much easier to connect. Now I've got my 12 gauge black wire. I'm going to slide my heat shrink over it. That way, once I make the connection, I can slide it over and shrink it. I went ahead and turned on the lights and they worked great. So now I'm going to go ahead and warm up the heat shrink so I can protect the wires. Now it's time to wire up our daytime running lights, and I have the wire coming from the driver's side and the passenger side right here. So I'm going to take these two and I'm going to combine the yellow of each and the white of each, and then I'm going to take some remaining wire that I had previously cut off. So this is also 22 gauge wire, and I'll do yellow to yellow and white to white, and the wires up here will run to the circuit control box. Now I am actually using the same gauge wire for all 4 lights, but this is just the daytime running light, meaning I'm not too concerned about the amperage that it's pulling and whether the 22 gauge can handle it. It should be able to handle it just fine, but if you did want some additional security, you could easily step up to 18 gauge wire. So just like I did with the main light, I'm going to take my 2 connections and I'm going to twist these together, and then I will twist these onto the main wire that I have running to the box up in the engine bay. And then I will solder and heat shrink the connection. Now there's our connection for all 4 lights that are going to run to a main yellow and white wire. Now that I have my main power wire, my ground, my white DRL, my yellow DRL, I'm going to put them all together in some 3/8 wire loom. And then I will run this to the control box. Now I'm going to follow the factory wiring, the same kind of location where I put my winch power lines. I ran all my wires through the engine bay, and now it's time to finally wire them up to the switch panel. I want my main light on switch 2, that's a 30 amp, and then I'm gonna put the DRLs right next to that. I am gonna use the 20 amps, not necessarily because they need the 20 amp switches, but more so because I want the buttons next to each other. I could probably even get away with putting these on the 5 amps at 7 and 8, but like I said, I want all the buttons next to each other, so it just makes sense logically for me when I'm using the switch panel. So we're gonna go ahead and take our red wire here, and we will put that in switch 2's positive right there, and then I will take the ground wire and put that in switch 2's negative. And these are screwed in from the factory, so you do need to turn them counterclockwise in order to open them up. And I'm just gonna twist the wires a little bit. This 12 gauge wire is really thick, so there's not much you can do with it. Now I'm gonna run these through the little gap right there, stick it in and clamp it down. Make sure to push the wire all the way in there so it gets a good connection. And now I'm gonna do the same thing with the negative. Now the daytime running lights do not have a ground because they're getting their ground essentially from this wire. So all you need to do is take one wire, put it in the positive of the switch you want, and that's it. So what can you do, especially when you don't really have a good bumper that gives you an opportunity to hide your wires? Well, found these guys. They are magnetic cable tie holders, so you can pretty much put them wherever you like, and then you put a zip tie through them, and then you can manage your cables a little bit better. One other addition I did make is I put in grommets in the holes that I drilled in the bumper. Now pretty much everything is done except for putting on our stickers on our switch panel. Now before applying stickers, make sure you have cleaned off the Auxbeam switch panel if you've been touching it a lot to make sure that it gets good adhesion on the buttons. And what I like is there's kind of a nice cutout. Just kind of line up the edges here. I'm gonna go for the DRL, see if we can try to center it more in the middle. That one looks much better. Once you do your first one, you get the hang of it. I'm just lining up kind of the center, and that is a real good way to center them up. I was able to carefully remove this one and fix it, so overall I think it looks pretty good. If you want to see what Auxbeam includes in the kit, just in case you don't want to do this or you don't have access to make a mount like I did, there is this adjustable mount where you can mount it to your dash and then you tighten it in on the side there. And they also do include this flush mount, so you can pretty much mount it wherever you'd like if you want a flush mount panel. Now this is a pretty good option, but for me, I didn't want any visible holes on my dash. But those are two viable options that you have right out of the box with the Auxbeam switch panel. Another creative solution that I've seen is modifying a phone holder to mount your switch panel, and I have seen phone holders that go right here. That could be a pretty cool solution as well. And it is a lot easier to get to the driver's side grommet down there under the footwell. For me personally, I like the way this looks. Plus I have the Android head unit and I have the switch panel app loaded up. So let me go ahead and show you that. All I had to do to download it was go into the App Store, search switch panel, and it popped right up. It does appear to be a generic switch panel app and not branded by Auxbeam. Now I've actually already customized it to match my switch panel, but let me show you real quick what you can do. There are preset colors, and as I change them here, they automatically change there. Now what's cool about this is the customization is pretty much endless. You can upload your own photo or use the list of default icons that they have, which is honestly quite a bit. In addition to those features, you can actually change the mode of how the buttons actually function. So toggle on and off, momentary, or pulsed. So that's all done right here as well. So you would click the button that you want to change and then you can change it here. Now if you wanted multiple lights to come on together, you could use group, and then you can select I want my bumper and my DRLs to come on, and then edit group, and then you can name them. So I could name it front, save that, and now we have the group right there. Once you create a group, when you press them, they come on together. Now to delete that group I just created, I swipe over right here and click delete. Even with the fog lights in my bumper, these Auxbeam pods really impressed me. The way the front beams pair with the side shooters gives you excellent coverage, perfect for lighting up dark trails and spotting hazards along the sides of the road or trail. If this video helped you out, hit that like button, subscribe for more Ford content, and share any tips or suggestions in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.